Welcome to Relationship Equity, a podcast that explores how successful people cultivate meaningful connections with others in their personal and professional lives. Learn from the stories, insights, and advice of leaders, innovators, and influencers who have built strong bonds with their teams, their customers, their communities, and their families. Here's Richard Walker.
My guest today is Mo Bunnell, the author of the Snowball System and the new book, Gift to Grow, which offers a practical playbook for building relationships to grow your business and career. Mo's trained thousands of professionals on scaling business development skills and creating growth-oriented cultures. So Mo, I'd like to start with a big question.
Sounds good.
Who is Mo Bunnell?
I'll actually start with the book with our new book, Gift to Grow, because it has an opening line that we put in big, huge font over 3 pages. I wake up every morning looking to help my friends succeed, and some just happen to be clients. I think it answers your question, because I feel like, who am I? Well, I feel like one of the things I'm really happy with is I love giving first. I love helping other people. And I love doing it in a way that not only helps them, but potentially could help me in my business and our impact on the world, and just creating this loop of giving where you're always able to give a little more with a little more emphasis or leverage or impact. Doing that over and over and over your whole life just hopefully not only helps you grow a business, but helps you grow a better life too.
Now, that's your philosophy as a man, as a human. And this is going to be an unfair question to ask because obviously you don't know the answer. But what's your gut reaction to my next question? Would you say the majority of people think and operate that way in their lives or not?
Oh, wow. I don't have the data on this, and I love backing things up with the research. I think if we could call Adam Grant, I think he would have the answer with this give and take research. But I don't know the percentages, but I feel like most people are a little more worried about themselves than others. And an example I'll give, Richard, is like if you just go to I'll tell you a story. One time I was at a pretty big fundraiser and sat next to somebody that was on my left. A close friend had bought a whole table. So there were like 10 people at this table. Happened to sit next to somebody I'd never met before. And we're there for like 2.5 hours. It's a long time. Now there's a little bit of chit chat across the table, but with a table of 10 people, it's sort of hard to talk to the person across to you. You're almost really stuck with the person on your left and right. Well, my wife is on the right. She's having this engaging conversation to the person on her right. So I'm with this guy on my left. And that's about all I can talk to unless I stand up and move around. Richard, we were there for like 2.5 hours. Call of it a half hour was a speech. So there's 2 hours to talk. At the end of those 2 hours, I realized that I had probably asked 50 questions of the person on my left, and he didn't ask one question about me. I'm not even sure he knew my name.
Believe me, I've been in many similar situations myself in my life. Why do you think that is?
I just wonder if it's tribal, or like almost Neanderthal. Like we're worried, like we've had tens of thousands of years of worried about where our next meal is going to come from. And it can create a self-centricity. And I think the people that have the really big impact on the world, like you, are the people that are other-focused first. And sure, they do things that could be mutually beneficial, but the first move is, how can I help, not how can I take?
I want to read you something I received this morning from my nephew across the pond. And he's in education. Wonderful young fella. I want to read this to you because he used my book in a class he was teaching. He said, had my team scratching their heads at this for 2 hours on Friday, I think half of them left with a new view of the world and the other half wanted to crawl into a hole. And what he put up on the board was doing good by doing well, or doing well by doing good. So obviously he challenged them with who they are as a person. Are they thinking about themselves first and foremost, and maybe only themselves? Or are they thinking about others as well? And it's an interesting question because you obviously feel you live your whole life thinking about, and I love what you said about, I like to help people succeed, and I want to help them with whatever challenges are. Some of them just happen to be clients. if you use that same philosophy in life in general, then you can't possibly do anything else other than win. So, I like to answer as well. I think you were, because obviously you're a very good person, and it's hard to say anything that's might be negative or perceived to be negative. I believe that, unfortunately, more people are very much self-thinking first, and sometimes only self-thinking and self-serving, I should say. But there are those people like yourself that are very much not that way. My question is, the people that don't live their lives serving through others, can they change that? Can they change the way they think, and can they change the way they live their lives to be more, put others first before yourself? Can they do that?
Yeah, without a doubt. It's just without a doubt. There's some research out of Florida State. A guy named Dr. K. Anders Ericsson passed away a couple years ago. He's the person that a lot of people think of as the 10,000 hour rule guy. Malcolm Gladwell popularized the idea, but it was actually Ericsson's research. And what he found over 30 years of studying complex skill development is that every complex skill is both learned and earned. Everything. No one is born with it. Now, we can be born with being tall or not. We can be born with being having really, being flexible or not, being fast or not, like athletic kind of skills. But when it comes to roll-ups of skills like being successful in life, which is hundreds of skills all rolled up together, every single time something was a roll-up of complex skills, the people who were great were people who practiced it. And this idea of giving first, but doing so in a very specific way that doesn't have to, but would most likely be helpful to us too, that's a skill that can be learned. And we've trained at this point 50,000 plus people how to do that.
Well, let's talk more about that then. How do you do, not to get into the complexities of your program with how you do that, can you share at a high level, how you go about doing that? You walk into a group of people who, first of all, how do you determine, that, not that there's just two separate camps, but let's just say there are for the sake of argument, the people who are self-serving and the people that are not. How do you first determine where somebody is with that? And of course, self-awareness comes into this, because a lot of people no doubt feel as though they think of others first. Really they don't, but they just like to think that they do. How do you give somebody a baseline?
Yeah, well, there actually is some research here. So I joked about if we could call Adam Grant a second ago for the percentage breakdown, but he actually has taught, and this is research out of Penn, everybody, that he actually has taught us what types of people there are. In his vernacular and in the research, the literature, there's givers, which we've identified. There's takers, which we've identified. But there's actually a third group, and it's called matchers. Those are people who are almost tit for tat. Like in each conversation, I'll only give to you if you give to me. And what he found in his research is super interesting. Initial studies, he really thought, his hypothesis was that, one of those three groups, givers, matchers, takers, would be the most successful and live the best life and all these kind of things across different domains and industries. But what he found was that it wasn't stratified like that. The givers, people who give more than they receive, the people that we aspire to be, they actually were the top of the heap in success, and a big chunk of them were actually the bottom of the heap. They were split. It's so fascinating. So a big part of them were the most successful, and the big part were the least. So then he had to do follow-up studies to figure out, well, what gives with givers? Why are some are literally the worst successful and literally the most successful, very thematically and according to the data. And what he found was there was one big difference. The people who were the successful givers were ones that gave away in chunks that would likely benefit them. They're never expecting anything from any exchange. They give first without expecting a thing. That's really important, according to its definition. But they would scale up the give to the potential size of the payoff to them. So a simple example is if somebody cold emails us from our uni and they said, hey, can you help me network? And, we want to help them too, but we might box that into a 15-minute phone call. Your boss asks you for help, or a client says, can you help me with this? We don't have any budget right now. Say it's a client. We don't have any budget right now, but boy, we could use your help. Well, you might box that into 15 hours. Like you might really dive in. So the successful givers were the ones who sized their giving to the potential payoff. The unsuccessful givers were the ones that just helped everybody based on whatever the request is made. They just did whatever was asked. And this was a great line from the research. He said, those folks ended up either getting burned or burning out. So if we can A, learn to help first, B, not expect anything in return, but C, size the amount of the give to the expected payoff, that's the winning strategy.
Yeah, I buy that 100% because it comes down to the value of our time. And if you share the same amount of time with somebody where there's less likely going to be some kind of reciprocal value, then you're
Bingo.
taking away from the time with a higher value time you could be spending with somebody. So you still help the person for 15 minutes, but there's less likely going to be a reciprocal type of value without asking. And that's in my book, I talk about the difference between relationship equity and quid pro quo. Give me your definition of the difference. I mean, my term relationship equity, very much along the same lines as your book. How do you define the difference between quid pro quo and developing relationship equity with people?
Yeah, for me, I think of almost like investing. So if we invest in the stock market and in air quotes, dollar cost average, you invest a little bit all the time and you don't mess with it and you let it run. Those are the people, science shows, that have the most wealth at the end. You keep investing no matter if the stock market's up or down and you let it run. Well, the same could be true if we think about investing in relationships. It's the folks who are investing a little bit all the time to everybody, but a little bit more towards the people that have the highest potential payoff. And if they're doing that consistently over the course of their lives, they're building up this relationship equity with important people. And then when they do need help, and you say, "Can you help me with something that's important?" the person jumps to help you because you've helped them 99 times in a row. So I don't know if that lines up. Yeah, comment on that idea.
Yeah, it's a really tricky equation. I'll give you a quick example. An executive of our biggest client, I'm going back about 10 years ago now, his office was bigger than the hometown I grew up in, Mo. It was ridiculous. And I became really good friends with him. And he said, my daughter's coming back from the armed forces. Bear with me now, because it's kind of a longer story. Can you help her? Of course I can. What do you want me to do to help? And now I've become friends with this fella outside of doing business with him. And we had a personal relationship, went and played golf and shared a lot of personal stories. I met with this lady, very, very impressive. And she actually wrote about this in my book. I asked her what she wanted to do, and she wanted to get into a leadership role in an engineering type of situation. And then I asked her, what kind of culture, what kind of company works well for you? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, some cultures are very fast-paced and some are more methodical and some are much bigger, startups, everything in between. She said, Richard, have you ever been shot at? I said, well, what do you mean? Has anybody ever tried to kill you? I said, well, apart from my wife, I can't really think of anybody. But she said, when you've been out in the desert for 2 weeks and you haven't showered and people are trying to blow your head off, things like company culture don't matter. I said, okay, got it. I helped you get this. You like this more. I helped to get this job. I've got to point to this story, so bear with me. And about 3 months later, she called me and said, let's have a cup of coffee. I went and met with her. She said, that thing about company culture you talked about? I said, yeah. She said, I get it now. This place is way too damn slow for me. They don't want to listen to me. You need to get me the hell out. Now, and I said, well, so what are your challenges? She said, well, I'm trying to build this team of IT talent. And I just can't find the right people. Now, back then, that was the primary service we provided, was building teams of IT talent. And I said, well, why didn't you call me? She said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, that's what we do. She said, oh, you never told me that. I just spent all my time helping her and helped to get her first job. She didn't know how she could reciprocate because I hadn't told her what we did for a living. So that changed. I was going to ask you, that was a pivotal moment in how I changed the way that we do business at York, because we go out of our way, not just me, but the company, to put people first and help them however they can. But most people, now not everybody, but most people, if you've done something significant for them, they just by human nature want to pay that back in some way, shape, or form. How can they do that if they don't know how to? So did you have that kind of moment yourself? How do you keep the integrity of relationship equity and not quid pro quo, and also help them understand what they can do to help you if they choose to do so? Does that make sense?
It totally does. And yeah, I can even give a process around this that's super helpful. I think most times when we're talking about ourselves, let's say I'm somebody that's trying to win a client. So a little different situation than you were in, obviously. I would generally want that. Let's say we have a half-hour introductory meeting. I would generally want them, A, talking at the beginning, and B, talking about 70 or 80% of the conversation. And that means thoughtful questions, finding ways to follow up, making recommendations, offering, and a perfect phrase, by the way, to offer support is, would it be helpful if? Would it be helpful if I did an analysis for you? Would it be helpful if I introduced your expert that can help in that area? And just over and over and over, hitting with gifts of knowledge and time and connections and any way we can help. At some point, say it's around 20, 22 minutes into this 30-minute call, so about 70, 80% of the way through, that's a perfect time to pivot and say, hey, I got a couple challenges. Can I share one with you? Or would you mind if I got your advice on something? Sometimes we don't even need to ask for help. We can ask for advice. It's a little lighter way to do it. Let me describe something. And I'm really curious, what would you do if you were me? It's a really nice way to ask for advice. Describe a thing you want and say, what would you do if you were me? Or in the case you were at, we might spend, like as you look back, I bet you would have spent like the last 5 minutes just talking a little bit about your organization, what you're doing at York, things like that. Anyway, my point is, I love the idea of starting with helpfulness, starting with trying to help them before we ask for help, because it models the behavior. It shows them the amount we're willing to go to help them. And then in that last smaller portion of the call, usually that's the time to mention something we're working on or where we could use some help or, anything. And I think that's a nice way to balance it. What do you think about that process and that rough percentages and things like that?
So I'll tell you what it did for me when the light bulb went on for me when this lady said one of the reasons why she was frustrated, and she didn't know what we did. Future meetings, not just with me, but all the sales team, what we would do is, and what we still do now is, because I spend a lot of my time providing what people would call free consulting, helping, we're not a placement firm, but I make a lot of connections for people. But the first question I always ask somebody that I'm trying to help is, so what do you know about York? And most say, well, not much. Okay, if you don't mind, let me spend 5 minutes talking about the services we provide, because, when you land, when I help you land in your next role, should you need services for like ours, I would like to, have somebody come and chat with you to see if we can help you achieve your goals. So it's as simple as that. Now, that's just conversation, and that's so easy. That's not saying I'm only going to help you if you give me business back. There's a subtle but significant difference there, because I can't tell you I call it the baseball rule. 70% of the time, the best batters in the world, they fail. But 30% of the time, they make millions and millions of dollars. And it's similar concept in my mind that you could help, if you can, if the benefit of the value is reciprocated 30% of the time, you win. Because as a result of changing that little philosophy with how, I first engage with somebody and I let them know who we are and what we do and the services we have, that's opened up all kinds of new doors for us, because the people that want to reciprocate, they do.
Yeah. I love the way you talked about that. And I think the key thing to point out for the audience is that in my example, we talk about ourselves at the end. In your example, you talk about yourself in the beginning. They both can work great. The thing that you said that was gold, that I want to make sure every single person listening to this hears it, is two things. One is you weren't selling anything. You weren't promoting. You weren't saying you need me to do this or you need to do that. The other thing you did is you boxed it into like 5 minutes. It wasn't, and you verbally said that. Would it be okay if I shared what we do for 5 minutes? Well, once somebody hears that, they're like, oh yeah, I can do that. I know, because they're probably, like we've been talking about, they're probably sitting there needing to tell you something. I need your help, Richard, to do X, Y, or Z. But they're willing to go, oh yeah, I'll do that for 5 minutes. And then I'll have 20 minutes myself. And then we wrap up at the end. This is great. So I just love how you phrased it, how you boxed it in and where you put it. I think that could work really well.
I appreciate that. But the other part of it as well that's important, it isn't, and when you land in your role, I want to come and meet with you so we can sell our services. It's when you land in your role, if you run into problems where you might need help with the solution you're trying to deliver on, then give me a shout. We'd love to sit down with you, see if we can help. To see if we can help And there's a subtle difference between, the old sales, let me give you the feature and the benefits of what we do because we're better than anybody else. You like this one more, you can steal this one. Hey, when I first meet with somebody and they ask about our services, I always say to them that, we consider ourselves to be the absolute second best company in our space. Now, what's the follow-up question?
Who's first? Why do you say second? Things like that.
We haven't come across anybody better than us yet, but we're a bit too arrogant to say that we're the best.
I love it. And it's funny too. Funny. I'm writing it down.
Yeah, write that down more. It's just funny. And on that note, let's talk about that for a second, humor as it relates to relationships. Because to me, it's an imperative part of developing a relationship with somebody. If you can generally make somebody laugh, we all like to laugh. So how does that play into your way of developing relationships with people and just relationships in general? How important do you think that is?
Well, I think it's very important. One of the things in the new book, Give to Grow, is there's 4 gifts that we can give our clients. Speaking more broadly, that we can give anybody, whether we're at a family party or we're talking at a conference or we're meeting a potential new client. And the very first gift of those 4 that there's an entire chapter about is we call it focus on engagement. The gift that we're giving the person is attention. We all crave and love attention. One of the subsections of that chapter, focus on engagement, is use humor. And all what the literature shows is unanimously true. When we laugh, and what the researchers actually find is a true laugh, like not a smile or using sarcasm actually is detrimental. We don't want to do that. But true jovial, like team sport, somebody tells a joke and somebody laughs at it, or hopefully a whole group, is what humor brings is more innovation, more creative ideas. People that are negotiating actually have better results when they use humor. The terms are better in the end. The people enjoyed the experience more. Everything from superficial enjoyment down to deeper, I like that person and I want to do business with them and I want to move forward. Humor helps all of those things. And I think it's something I'll just wrap with this and get your thoughts, but I just think it's something that in business, and I'm doing air quotes around that, a lot of people step on humor and say, oh, well, that has no meaning here. No, exact opposite. You can differentiate yourself when you're using humor.
I couldn't agree more with you. Now, can you overdo it?
Yeah, because almost all of our clients are high-end professionals. So we're teaching growth skills to lawyers, accountants, account managers at huge outsourcing companies like U.S. healthcare companies, people like that. Folks that take 10, 15, 20, 30 years to build up enough expertise that they can be in demand and help people in a meaningful way. And what you need to be successful in those roles is not only the humor and the ability to relate to people. Doesn't mean you're extrovert or introverted, but just the ability to authentically relate and build relationships like we're talking about here. But you also have to have the goods. You also have to, if you're a lawyer, you also have to be taught, you have to know and predict and be able to help somebody think through how the new regs are going to hit their business, or how you might plan to defend this litigation or this class action you just got served papers for, or whatever it is. And so it's this balancing act of people skills and deep technical expertise. Man, those are the people who can really be change agents in the world. And if you only have the people skills, you're fun to go to the ball game with, but you're hollow. If you only have the expertise, people value what you say, but they don't want to be around you, because you're sort of a jerk.
They'll spend 15 minutes with you, then go and have fun with the body.
Yeah, exactly.
You need both. And if you can, and timing as well is obviously, timing and humor is obviously very important, but it's knowing when to use humor and when not. And I often struggle with that because I just like to laugh and like to make people laugh, but it has to be used at the right time. If you got something serious, you got a problem you're tackling that you want to come up with a solution for, then tackle it. Get after it. But I think infusing humor into any given situation, I put something on LinkedIn not too long ago, which I found absolutely hilarious. And it was such a little thing, but it had a kind of a profound impact on me. I was at the DMV, and nobody likes going there. It's such I don't know whether you saw it or not, Mo, but it's a drag and it's a pain in the ass.
You dread it. You're afraid. Yeah. You're like, I hope I take the right paperwork. I don't want to have to go back.
And I walk in there, and the first thing I see on a big post is a massive sloth. And I thought, well, that's weird. And then I burst out laughing because I realized that they're poking fun at themselves. They're so slow. They've got this big sloth up there. And it completely changed my whole demeanor. And I realized, okay, well, you're going to be sorry for a while. It is what it is. And I just kept looking at that. I actually took a picture of it and stuck it on LinkedIn because I found it very funny. You know, situational humor and people that can infuse humor into any given situation, I think is a very important thing to do.
Yeah, there's some really cool research called the peak end rule, and it says that people remember the peak of an experience and they remember the very ending. It is just widely studied, multiple studies, things like that. And one of the ways that, and this is super practical for your audience, one of the ways that you can end a meeting perfectly is to leverage the peak end rule, which means you actually have two closings. You have these are our words now. You have the practical close and the emotional close. The practical close is so-and-so is going to do this by then, and you're going through the list of to-dos that came out of it. Yeah, she's going to send this to her, and this guy's going to follow up with that to her and things like that. That's a great way to end a meeting because it's a recap, but it's a little boring. So that's stale. You got to do it, but you don't want that to be the very ending. That's the practical close. Then the emotional close is right before you walk out of the room or leave the restaurant or click end on the Zoom meeting or whatever. That's where you replay whatever the peak emotional part of the experience is. Maybe at the beginning of the meeting, somebody said, yeah, well, I can't meet next week because my family's going to Africa. We haven't done anything since COVID. This is our first family trip in 5 years. I'm real excited. Well, that might have been a throwaway line, but they're begging for you to pay attention to that. So then at the very beginning, you say, hey, Jane, I got to say it again. Have fun in Africa. I cannot wait to see photos. Send your best over, and we'll catch up in 2 weeks.
It's so powerful what you just said, and I can't tell you how many times I've actually said something on a meeting and didn't even remember I'd said it. I give an example, and then the next follow-up, somebody brought it back. Like the one time, because we're on an island through the winter months down in Florida, and I go fishing a lot. And it was an important client that I've known for many years. I said, can we hurry up and get this damn meeting finished with that? I've got to go fishing. So at the start of the next meeting, he said, so did you catch anything?
How'd it go? Yeah,
exactly. That's what he'd remembered.
Yeah.
He was kind of tongue-in-cheek. It was, I knew him well enough. I mean, I wouldn't say that in every meeting, especially with people I don't know very well. But for somebody I know very well, I've done business with for years, they know who I am. And they know that I'm anxious to go fishing. And it's something I read a lot, and this isn't rocket science, and a lot of people will know this, but something that really stuck with me, facts. They tell. And we all need numbers, and we need facts. But stories sell. And people remember stories, especially if they're personal. Now, it's extremely important as you're developing a relationship, whether you're in sales or not, because let's face it, everybody's in sales. Everybody on earth. We're all trying to influence people. Now, that word sales, let's talk about that for a second, because I'm learning ChatGPT, and it's kind of frightening right now to me because I own a technology company, and I'm not a technologist, and it's kind of a standing joke. Everybody knows, family, friends, clients, they all know, but I've got a brilliant team of technologists. But, I likened it. So we have what we call a learning initiative, not a training program, learning initiative, because the emphasis is on the student. Now, we're all students. These students are all professionals and accomplished professionals, but we're all students. So we've started this big new initiative right now. I talked this morning about I liken ChatGPT and AI, and I want to talk more about that with you in a second now, but I likened it to 1994. I know that sounds, I'm old. 1994, I remember this. I was trying to get in touch with somebody. I opened an office in Dallas, Texas. I'd lived in St. Louis, Missouri at the time, and I'd called him a couple of voicemails, and I'd sent him a fax. No response. And the office administrator said, have you sent him an email? I said, what's an email? Now, again, there's going to be some youngsters listening to this laughing at me like I'm some old idiot, but it's not that, in 1994 is not that long ago when nobody was using email. It just came out. And I said, well, that'll never catch on. Well, look what it did. The whole world uses email right now. So to me, AI, OpenAI, especially ChatGPT, will be to the world as email was back then in 94 when nobody really knew what it was and everybody embraced it. And everybody is using, well, not everybody's using it. I'm not using it yet. I met with an executive 2 weeks ago for the first time. He asked to meet with me. I met with him, and it was mind-boggling to me how much he knew about me. Mind-boggling. He'd done research upon research, and I didn't really know why, but he did. And the fella, then I met with the fella on Friday for lunch, and he said, I'm just going to call him Joe for the sake of names. He said, do you know how Joe prepared to meet with you? I said, I have no idea. He said he had ChatGPT summarize your book into chunks and to come up with topics of conversation that you're likely going to want to discuss. And I was blown away by that, because I walked away from that first meeting with this fella feeling good about what we're doing as a company, feeling good. Now, everybody wants to feel good after a meeting, wherever the meeting, it doesn't matter. The whole purpose is, if you're having a meeting with somebody, is for that person to walk away there feeling good, hopefully about themselves and about the outcome of the meeting, that there's going to be a positive result for both parties involved. But I was so impressed. But he used technology. He used technology in a way that I never thought to use, to basically understand who I am as a person, not just as a professional, but as a person. And it was very impressive. Now, he used that information very, very appropriately. What he didn't do is say, let me tell you about you, and start reading off a bunch of stuff So I found that very, very intriguing. So what are your thoughts about that, Mo?
Well, I think it's brilliant. And I think I'll just give a shout out to my friend Dan Shipper. He runs a company called Every. And the reason they call it Every is because every day they send out an email about AI. And it's a paid subscription. It's the best I find about a lot of the AI articles that are just on the normal web are just superficial and yay, it's big and we should use it, but it doesn't tell you how to use it. But Every tells you how to use it. And I've learned two big chunks of when it comes to business development and relationship development, which is of course our topic, is I found two major ways to use AI, and man, it is a game changer. Way number one is to do research and prepare, and that's the perfect example of what your colleague did or your client did. And here he had a book that he could absorb into ChatGPT and have summarized, which is insanely powerful. But there's typically so much information out on the web. All of Apple Podcasts are now transcribed. All that's on the web. YouTube video, they're sure transcribed. That's on the web. So we can find so much information about somebody, whether it's somebody calling on us or an organization or person we're calling on. The other major way I've found that's helping a lot is to refine things. So let's say we're reaching out to several people on the same topic. Well, we could have ChatGPT refine a core email to personalize it for each of the 52 people we're going to send to. And one of the things that's in Give to Grow, the book I think you would love, Richard, is the idea that when we're doing work in delivery mode, long emails make a lot of sense. You've got 7 things that you need to do the analysis or the tech strategy or whatever, like put everything in one place. That's after you're hired. When we're trying to get hired, when we're winning the work, actually short emails are better. Because if you have a bunch of complexity and 7 questions in the email, it just gets deferred. So a good rule of thumb for the audience is that one screen in Outlook on an iPhone. Think about this. We're triaging emails on our iPhone, many times replying throughout the day. We're running between meetings. You want to keep your business development emails down to one screen on an iPhone, because even if somebody skims it, they almost accidentally read the whole thing and reply. You get quick action. It's all about momentum. That's about 50 words. 50 words is hard to write. You can do it, but you only get a chance for one question and you better be brief. Well, ChatGPT can say, you could type in your normal email and say, get this to 50 words. And it can do the lifting for you. So anyway, item 1 for, I think, AI is research and prep. Item 2 is for refining things that you're already working on. And boy, it could be, there's other ways too, of course, to use it, but those are 2 killer ones for relationship developers.
Very powerful, because for people like me, more than 25 words, you lost me. Unless the first 25 are really intriguing, then I might...
Maybe you get to the second 25. But gosh, how many people do you know that, they write up this big long thing, and these are the 17 reasons you should attend the webinar, and I can introduce you to this person, and here's this question buried in the middle. Like, whenever you get a big email, you just defer it, and you're feeling a sense of dread.
That's so true. All right, Mo. Unfortunately, we have to stop here. Coming up in the second part of my talk with Mo Bunnell, the author Give to Grow, Invest in Relationships to Build Your Business and Your Career. We'll discuss why you don't need to be an extrovert to be a successful influencer.
What we see correlate to be an influencer, to have a big impact on the world, is to thoughtfully think about where you want to take a relationship or an organization or a chunk of an organization and make consistent progress in bringing people to that change. It's more about having the vision and continuing to be helpful, driving people towards the vision. You can be introvert, extrovert, or anything in between. If you have that skill, where you wake up in the morning being proactive and moving towards a destination, that's what success looks like.
This has been Relationship Equity. If you want to take your career, your business, or your personal relationships to the next level, reach out to Richard at yorksolutions.net. You can also get Richard's book, Relationship Equity, your cornerstone investment to great gains in business and life, on Amazon now. Relationship Equity with Richard Walker is a production of Forbes Books.